Well, it's good to see you here this morning. Whoa. There we go. No, still a little cavity. If you're visiting again with us this morning as part of families who had someone baptized, thank you so much for being here. And we hope that this morning is a blessing to each and every one of you who joins us, whether that's here in person or as we stream live. Good to see each and every one of you. Well, let me invite you to take out your message guide this morning. It's available for you in the program. And we have been working through some of life's questions. This is kind of the Summer Stumper series. We also have been calling it Tough Questions. These are questions that come up in the course of discussions with individuals as we talk about our faith and as people discuss religion. And these are serious questions that are important. Sometimes we allow life in all of its busyness to kind of push these issues aside, push them off, and we don't begin to think about them. We don't engage in these areas. These questions that we're dealing with are kind of from all over the place. Some are philosophical, others are perhaps a little more pointed. But this morning, in light of having our baptism and celebrating baptism, I thought it was appropriate that maybe we look at the question of, is Christianity too narrow? Is Christianity too narrow? Is there really only one way to go? And this morning, as the ladies have testified, they have put their personal faith in Christ. They are seeking now, having done so, to live lives that please Him, that are a delight to Him, that are fulfilling in a true sense. But in opening the door to Jesus, you close the door to other things, because the way of Jesus is an exclusive way. It's an exclusive way. There's a potent question in our culture today, and this is a potent question in our culture today, a culture like ours. And there has been a pretty large, if you would, a growth in the number of books authored about issues such as, is Christianity too narrow? Is there any other way? Aren't all gods the same? Isn't it just many different paths in the same place? That kind of thing. Pew Research, which you may be familiar with, are quoted on news shows all the time and stuff, is considered to be somewhat respectable. They're considered to be authentic in their research. The Pew Research found that 1/5 of atheists who responded to a survey, in the survey, said that they believed in God. Now, does that sound a little weird? 1/5 of the people who responded, who identified, 1/5 of the atheists who responded, said they believed in God. And really, that kind of doesn't compute, does it? And I venture to say, and this probably is a whole different discussion or whatever, that the traditional definition of atheist really doesn't apply anymore. There are varieties in today's culture of atheists and atheism. Michael Lindsay, who is the president of Gordon College, if you would, just down the road, said in response to this same survey and to this same issue, he said, it's not, and this is actually up there, it's not that Americans don't believe in anything. It's not that they're atheists, they don't believe there's a God. It's that they believe everything. It's that they believe everything. We have all kinds of ideas today, and we embrace all different forms of belief and thinking, and we want to make it all come together in some understandable and comfortable way. In some places, though, let's just face the fact that it doesn't work. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. You can't be an atheist, if you would, and still believe in God. It just doesn't compute. Tim Keller, who's the former pastor of Redeemer Presbyterian down in New York City. Tim is a theologian. He's a student of culture, particularly inner city culture. But Tim Keller did a survey, an informal survey of the members of his church, And he has enough members in his church that the sample he would pull from really is representative of the large swath of culture. And he asked the question whether Christianity was too narrow. And the response from the people who did the survey was that was the number one question that people were asking today. So in Tim Keller's church, the number one question people are asking is Christianity too narrow? Or the question they're being asked. And it's really true in our age of acceptance, our age of tolerance, our age where we see religion as divisive. And in some sense, religion really is. And I want to kind of, if you would, step away, come off the rail for a second. And this was something that kind of brewed in my mind yesterday as I was kind of thinking through this morning. We often talk about the difference between religion and relationship. Religion and relationship. Religion seems to be characterized, and we characterize it as our attempt, if you would, or the things that we do to get to God or to connect with God. However, we talk about Christianity and we talk about having a personal faith in Christ because as Christians, we don't believe there is anything that we can do to get us to God. We can't be good enough. We cannot go to church often enough. We cannot be born into the right family, and so therefore we are Christian truly. Religion doesn't, if you would, work for us. So as Christians, we talk about relationship. And the beauty of relationship is that, in this case, it is what God has done to meet us. Because we can't do religion, God offers us relationship in Jesus Christ. Why is it that religion, if you would, quote unquote, is so divisive? And as I thought about it, this is kind of what popped into my mind. When I talk about someone's religion, and I talk about the things that they are doing to connect with God, for me to tell them that what they're doing really isn't going to make it, and for me to tell them that that really isn't what it's all about, and that it really isn't anything that they can do to connect with God, because God has done everything necessary to connect with them in the person of Jesus. It is very easy to see how religion becomes divisive because you are telling them that the things that they are doing really, in some sense, have no value. And so it's important to kind of really process these ideas and how we come to grips and how we think through addressing questions about embracing Jesus and having a relationship with Christ. And the discussion as to whether the way is narrow or the way is wide. So is the Christian way too narrow? Now this comes to us in a number of different questions. And just maybe you don't think about it in that way, but maybe you think about it this way. Here's one. How can Christians say that other faiths are wrong? How can Christians say that other faiths are wrong? Or how can any religion claim to be the only way? We live in such a diverse world. Wouldn't the world be a better and more peaceful place if we got rid of all the religion or the religious fanatics that claim that they're the right and the others are wrong? How can I say that other religions don't work? There are so many kind and authentic people in so many of the world's religions. So this morning I want to unpack this issue, and I want us to do it in the moments we have. We need to do this kind of briefly. And so perhaps this just whets your appetite to do a little bit more, do a little more study, a little more digging in this area. And the Right Now Media stuff that I mentioned before that we made available to the church, I've created a library of videos on that website that speak specifically to these questions that we are dealing with over these weeks. So if you have questions that I don't hit, or you say, oh, I'd really like to think about that more, if you go to the Right Now Media site and click on the library that's connected to Bethany Baptist Church, there are libraries of videos that I've already selected to kind of make it easier for you, so that you can just look at videos specifically about these tough questions, or the stumper questions that we often get asked. So let me invite you, if you don't have the subscription, to get it, and if you've got questions, to go there and begin to look a little bit deeper. But I want to look at this question this morning from the book of John, chapter 14. That's the passage we're going to approach this from. If you're using a Pew Bible, it's page 955. If you have your own, feel free to turn there and follow along, or use the message guide that I've already pointed you to. But in John 14, our text for this morning is verses 1 to 7. 1 to 7 is the text, the first verse down through the 7th verse. And here Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and this is the night of his crucifixion. This is the upper room setting, if you would, in the book of John. And he knows this. He knows where he's going. He knows, if you would, what his destiny is. And he is preparing his disciples for these moments and for what is to come. And so let's look at the passage of Scripture together, if you would. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And from now on, you know him and have seen him. Now, verse 6 here in this particular passage is really the heart of where we're going to go with regard to the narrowness question. But, and in verse 6, we have those famous words, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. It sounds pretty narrow to me when you read that. But I want to think about this in terms of the unit here, of this as a larger thought. Not just the verse itself, verse 6. And that really helps us deal with the question that we're coming to today. So this passage, what are the contributions that it makes to this question? And the first is this, is that this text, this passage here, presents a picture of Jesus' mission. Before we ever get to verse 6 and this whole issue of exclusivity, it gives us a picture of Jesus' mission. Why was Jesus here? What is he here for? Jesus himself here is describing it, and he's doing it for strategic reasons. Because just a little bit earlier, that same evening in John chapter 13, if we back up, he tells them, I'm going to leave you. I'm leaving you. In verse 33, he says, little children, I shall be with you a little longer. You will seek me. And as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you. He's telling them, I'm not going to be here that much longer. He's saying, I'm not going to be with you. And mind you, this is tough. This is a group of individuals. These people, these disciples, they have made radical choices to follow Jesus. They have made some incredibly tough decisions to follow him. They have left family. They have left jobs. They have left their friends. They left where they grew up. They left their hometowns. If you would, they burned a lot of bridges to be in relationship and to follow Jesus. And so for Jesus to say, I'm leaving, I'm going, is pretty traumatic for them. Now, the one that they're following, they thought he was going to be the Messiah. They thought Jesus was going to be the one to set all of these straight. And now he's telling them, I'm gone. I'm taking off. In a few moments, you will not see me again. And so all around them, if you would, their world is kind of crashing. I kind of get this sense. And what he's doing is he's consoling and he's comforting them. And in fact, he's telling them that in this verse, there is no final departure. There is no goodbye. What's happening here is, I will see you later. That's what's happening here. He's giving them a different perspective on this. And so in verse 1, he says, don't let your heart be troubled. And he starts out that way. Don't let your heart be troubled. Don't be upset. Don't get stirred up about this. Instead, believe in God. You believe in me. And then he goes on in verses 2 and 3, and he creates this picture to encourage that kind of trust. It's a picture of, if you would, his mission. He's going to the Father's house into the presence of God, where he lives, where they live, and there in his presence are many rooms. The King James says mansions. And sometimes we get this idea that when we go to heaven, we're going to have our own, do you remember the old song, I've got a mansion on the hilltop? Trust me, heaven is a place that's built and designed for community. And it's going to be more like an apartment building than I'm going to have my own mansion and come over and see you sometime. We just need to kind of clarify that kind of idea here. And so he's going to prepare this place for them. And in this place, there are many rooms, there's suites, these are special places for each and every one of them. And so imagine, if you would, that he's sitting there at the table with them, and he's just shared that he's leaving. But he says, don't worry. I'm going to prepare a place for you. I'm preparing a place for you, John, and Matthew, and for you, Peter, and Thomas. I'm preparing a place for you, and for you. And just imagine that he kind of looks around the table, and hey, be reassured, I'm preparing a place for you. For you. And he says, once I've done that, I'm going to come again, and I'm going to take you there to be with me. Now, think about that. It's not just one little room. It's that he's talking again to us about. It's the whole idea, of us all being together. Now, if you know anything about Bethany, if you go out this door here, you end up being where? It's a stairwell. All right? It's a stairwell that takes you down to the exit or takes you all the way downstairs. Imagine with me, if you would. This is so first grade, but you can do this. Imagine with me, if you would, that this door actually enters a closet. And when you go through the door, you're in a closet. And imagine, if you would, that inside that closet is God. God's in the closet. Now, certainly we can't put God in the closet, all right? But you want to, if you would, you want to get in that closet. Why? Because God's there. That's where God is. That's where I'm trying to get. I'm trying to have a relationship with him. The Jewish way of thinking about heaven was that it was a place of healing and light and beauty and glory. It was a place of transformation. It's a place where everything was the way it was supposed to be. But you just can't go and open the door and get in there. You just can't do that. You have to have some way to get in the door. To get in, to get, if you will, to God. There has to be a way for that to happen. You just can't go there. You need a pass or you need a ticket. And if you were to be honest, if you understand who God is, you'd have to be honest and say, you know what, I really don't deserve to go and be with him. Because I know God is holy and I know I'm God. I know God doesn't sin and I know I do. I know God is loving all the time, and I know I'm not. I know God never makes a mistake, but I know I make plenty of them. I really don't deserve to go there, but I want to. And Jesus comes, if you would, and he here becomes the way, the access to that. He opens the door. Now, if you picture home as a secure place, a place that you're known and loved, a place where everything is secure and things are put back together, don't you want that? Where the trials and the tribulations and the challenges and the suffering of each and every day is set aside. Wouldn't you want that? And so what Jesus says to these disciples here is, I am going to prepare a place for you. I'm leaving, and it's going to be hard. But I'm going to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you can come and you can be with me also. I'm going to prepare a place where you're not going to have to deal with all of this anymore. And so he comforts the disciples here with that. And that kind of brings us, if you would, down to verse 6. And in our culture today, we're told no one really has cornered truth, especially religious truth. Everyone is, if you would, allowed their own beliefs and their own systems. And it makes it tough. But that's why I'm glad that he spoke about why he came in such deeply attractive pictures as preparing a place for us. And it allows us to not push off the question to the side. We have to ask, is it okay for Christianity to be that narrow? And so let's look at the second thought here. So it not only provides his mission that he's going to prepare a place for us and he's leaving them, but the text also presents that Jesus proclaims his exclusivity. And so verse 6, he says he's going to prepare, he's going to come and get them. And Thomas says, we don't know where you're going, how can we get there? And so it's to that Jesus then says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, Herman Ridderbos, who is a famous theologian, Christian thinker, says this really is the core statement of John's Gospel. That this is really what all of John leads up to. Many of us focus on the book of John because we see so many miracles there. We also see in the book of John, some people will trace the I am statements through the book of John. I am the bread of life, I am the good shepherd, those types of things. But he says really when it comes to the book of John and you pull it all apart, this is really what the book of John is about. And that is Jesus presenting himself as the one and the only way to God. That the way truly is narrow. That the going to prepare a place for you so that where I am you may come to be with me also really is a very defining and narrow statement. And so he really is the only way, the only truth, and the only life. And so 4 times he says that here. He really sets himself up and makes it very clear his perspective, Jesus' perspective on this. So the first thing he says is, I am the way. And so this should be pretty obvious. And so if you're a filler-inner of the blanks, you know, these are pretty obvious ones for you. But he says, I am the way. He says, I'm not a way. He says, I am the way. I'm not one of several. I am the way. The common thinking of his day, and even of today, even more so, is that there are many ways. That all paths may ultimately lead to God. It just depends how you walk that path. But Jesus makes this exclusive statement. He goes on to say, I am the truth. There are many, quote, truths out there about God, about religion, about the afterlife, about all of these different things. He says, no, I am the truth. What you hear from me is the truth. I'm the very enfleshment of truth. He says that he is the life, that there may be many ways to experience life, but to experience life to the full, Jesus says, I am that life. There is no other way to have life to the full except through Jesus. And then the fourth way that he puts it, and it may not be so obvious, is he says this. He says, no one comes to the Father except through me. 4 different ways declaring his exclusivity. 4 times the exclusive statement, which leads us to the truth for today, and it's very simply this, that Jesus is the one and the only way to God. He is the one and the only way to God. And so don't miss his surprising statement here. It is what the book of John really points to, and we don't want to miss it. And we don't want to miss it for a couple of reasons, and I put those there. It's a surprising statement, if you would, and it's surprising for 2 reasons. The first is there's some ways in which you might think it's a little out of character. It's a lot out of character for Jesus to say that, and we know it is not, but if you think about the whole of what Jesus teaches, you might say, Jesus is the guy that I always love to hear what he had to say. Because Jesus is the one who said to love your enemies. I like that. That's good. Jesus also said that, you know what, he says a lot of things that I agree with. Do as you would have done unto you. I like that. We get into a lot of what Jesus says, but then when he says something like this, we might scratch our heads and say, boy, is this the same person? Because this is pretty small. I like the idea of loving everyone, but I don't necessarily like the limiting or the exclusive nature of this, because this rubs me the wrong way. It rubs my friends the wrong way. It rubs other people the wrong way. So what's going on here with Jesus? Is this in keeping with his character? But it's surprising in another way. It's surprising because he is absolutely crystal clear, unequivocal, unequivocal about it. He makes this claim 4 times. Other religious leaders, other people may imply this, they may think this, they may infer this, they may lead to this. Most would never have the courage, and I don't know if any other would have the courage to say it, but to back it up the way that Jesus does. But he's crystal clear about the fact that he is the only way. That there is now. Now, when somebody makes a statement with regard to this kind of thing, that all paths lead to God, but it really isn't narrow, if you would, it sounds pretty inclusive, doesn't it? Today we're about being inclusive, aren't we? That we want everyone to feel welcome, and we have to be inclusive and open and all of these things. And, that we all, if you would, that everyone who wants to, regardless of the path, gets in the room, gets in the closet. Everyone gets to God. But saying that all paths lead to God is just as much an exclusive statement as only one, isn't it? Isn't that pretty exclusive too? Because if you disagree, you're wrong. And you're outside the kingdom. There isn't a middle ground. Any statement about God really is an exclusive statement because of who God is and because of what is being talked about. It can't be avoided because it's the nature of truth. An English pastor, missionary, theologian named Leslie Newbigin wrote a book after he returned from India after many years serving as a missionary. And when Leslie came back from India and came back to Britain, what he found was the landscape of the church had changed. He found that the church that he had left was no longer there. That it had become much more cultured, much more open. We use words like affirming, if you would. And so the church that he came back to was nothing, it did not resemble any longer the church that he left when he went to first serve in India. And so he wrote some books and began to study the issue of church. The Household of God is a book that he wrote. And really became kind of a preeminent thinker in terms of the way that culture impacts the church and if you would, the ebb and flow of the church, where the church is going. And so he wrote a book called The Gospel in a Pluralistic Society, that there are many ideas, many ways to get to God in our world. And many of you will be familiar with a story that's often told about just the many paths that lead to God, about the king and the elephant and the 6 blind men. Have you ever heard this story? It goes like this. Once there was a king. He called his advisors to enlighten them. I'm going to teach you something today, the king said. He brought in 6 men blind from birth. They had never seen an elephant. He asked them to discover what an elephant was like. A wall, flat and smooth. No, a tail. He's like a rope. Another grabbed the leg. Oh, he is like a strong pillar. Another grabbed onto the ear and said, oh, an elephant is like a big fan. Hearing what the different blind people had to say, he pronounced all of them to be right. The reason being that each of them had touched a different part of the elephant. And then the story is related to God. The reason that Christianity is different from Judaism, or Taoism, or Buddhism, or Islam is that we're only touching a different part, a different aspect of God as Christians. And so this enlightened world that we live in says the truth is the sum of the different parts that you're able to encounter. Well, this illustration doesn't sit well for a lot of religions. And you could probably figure out, if you thought about it a little bit, why. For instance, the Hindu says that there are many gods. Christians would say there's only one God. The Hindu would say that Jesus may be one of those gods. We would say that Jesus is God. Christianity says that Jesus is God in the flesh. They would say there's no way that we're, and it goes, how do you bring this together? So this guy, Leslie Newbigin, hearing this story, says this. He says, basically, this is a story that people use to neutralize the affirmations of religion, to suggest that we have to learn humility and to learn that none of them can have more than a small bit of the truth. The real point of the story is exactly the opposite. He goes on to say, I'm sorry, because it actually is on the screen here and on your thing. He says it's actually the opposite. He says if the king were blind, there would be no story. The story is told by the king, and he is making the evident claim to see the full truth and pronounces everyone else to be blind. In other words, he's saying, what I want you to see is when someone says all of our paths lead to God, that's an arrogant claim. And it makes a statement that we would not agree with. And Jesus doesn't agree that all paths lead to God. The thing here, though, is that Jesus is completely transparent about it. He's completely clear about it. He doesn't mince any words. He comes out and he just says, there's only one path. I am the path. Jesus is up front and he makes the truth plain. Resting. The text also presents the point behind Jesus' claim to exclusivity. There's a reason why Jesus is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. And why Jesus is the narrow way, why Jesus is the way. And he touches on it in verses 2 and 3. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, and here it is. I go to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. What is Jesus saying when he says, I go to prepare a place for you? What is he saying there? Now, we tend to focus, if you would, on the place, don't we? And that's appropriate, and for the disciples here, that's a good thing because they need comfort. But what if we were to focus and to kind of examine something different here? Maybe the idea of, I go to prepare. We focus on the place. How does Jesus prepare the place for us? How does he do that? Where is Jesus going to do this preparation? What's the point behind all of this? Is the point that he's going to prepare a room for me, that he's going to fix it up, that he's going to have a nice lamp, and a table next to the bed? What's the point? The point is my going and preparing is the point. As nice as the place is going to be. Here he is reminding them, if you would, and the Gospel of John talks again and again and again about the way in which he will return. He tells us that he is here traveling, if you would. The road that he has to travel is a road of death. It's a road of the cross, death by crucifixion. John chapter 6, he says, I will be lifted up. We learn elsewhere it involves resurrection. We return to life. We looked this morning at baptism as what it's a picture of what Jesus did for us. It's a picture of his death, his burial, and his resurrection. Death for us to self, to be raised in Christ to newness of life. Why can Jesus say, and he does say, that he is the way, the truth, and the life? Because he is the one who goes and prepares the way. And the way he goes and prepares the way is by giving himself up on the cross, by dying in our place, by being buried, and by rising again. That Jesus himself, his death, his burial, and his resurrection is the reason that he is the way, that he is the truth, that he is the life. Here's a theological thought for you. Process this with me. We talk about Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life. We also talk about his death, his burial, his resurrection. I'm throwing this out there. Got no conclusion on this. Process it with me this week. Is there a way you can put the three things that Jesus says about himself with the three activities of his going and preparing together? His death, I am the way. There is no other way except I know. I am the way, I am the truth. Is there a truth connected with his burial, with him being in the tomb? I am the way, the truth, and the life. He rises again. The life that we live today, we live because he rose again and his Holy Spirit lives within us. If he didn't rise again, then we are of all people just the most foolish. Is there a way to put those two things together? I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Think about it. But Jesus also reveals, if you would, the point behind. Listen, there's no religion, there's no faith system that has a God that's going to die for you and rise to redeem you from the evil of sin. Not a single one. There's no place, there's no religion where you're not working moment by moment, all of your life, to get your way to God. But we look at Jesus and what happened. We saw this weeks ago, that God stepped out of heaven and he embraced the brokenness of our lives and of our world in order that his son may take our place, in the cross, so that we could be forgiven of our sins. Is Christianity too narrow? Absolutely not. Jesus himself makes the claim. And he makes the claim based on the extent, the length to which he was willing to go in order to bring us back to God. What he did for us was necessary. What he did for us is unique. That's why he was there. Each week, we've been encouraging you to take these questions and chew on them, to think about them, to talk about them. We've also been asking you to talk about them with your friends. We've been asking you, hey, when you think about this question this week, and you'll find it on the back of your message guide, you write down some thoughts there about this question. So when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and life, what does that mean? When Jesus said there's a broad way that leads to destruction, many take it, but there is a narrow way. What does that mean? When he says, I go to prepare a place for you, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then to take that and then to engage in conversation with somebody that you know who doesn't know Jesus and say, hey, you know what, at church we're talking about these things. And this past Sunday, the pastor was talking about, and today, boy, it's really tough. It's a tough sell to say the road is really narrow. What do you think? Here's what I thought about that. What do you think about that? And to engage your friend, your neighbor, your coworker in some discussion with regard to spiritual things. I'm trying to give you some doors, if you would, to knock on. Maybe you're here today, and it seems like you've been trying all kinds of stuff to connect with God. And it's really, if you have been trying. Let me remind you as we close today that God is the one who did the work to make that connection with us. The only thing you need to do is open your heart to it, to accept it, to realize that he's already done it, and to invite him in. Say, God, I've been trying. I need you to come and to do this because I cannot. And so I trust you and I put my faith in you. If that's your word here today, if that's where your heart's at today, please come talk with us after the service. There'll be some individuals down front here to pray with you, to talk with you. Maybe it's something else that the Lord has spoken to your heart about. We invite you to come. Let us pray with you. It is so good to see each of you this morning. And thank you so much for coming and celebrating with these two dear ladies, their commitment to follow the narrow way.